Hello, hello. How's everybody doing? Good. Nice to see you all this morning. My name is David McCormick. It's a it's a pleasure to be here with you guys this morning. We just did the Spanish service, and now we get to do the English service, and it's great to be here with you this morning. Just so you guys have a little bit of context, I'm originally from Canada, so if you hear a little accent, I am not from the South, so I'm sorry. I'm from the North. So you might hear a little different words that we use or whatever, but I am from Canada originally, but spent just about 18 years in Guatemala. And we are currently living in just north of New Orleans in Louisiana, so not too far from here. And I was back here, I think it was August or September. I was able to visit this church for the first time, and it's a pleasure to be back. So this morning, we're going to be talking a little bit about love because, as we all know, it was just Valentine's Day. Did anyone have a good Valentine's Day? I don't know what you guys... Valentine's Day has never been my favorite thing in the whole world. I don't know, but we're going to talk a little bit about that too. What our issues are with love in general. Because I don't know about you, but I have some issues with love sometimes. I'm not the best at giving love, and I'm not the best at receiving love. And sometimes I can do a little bit better giving love, right? Like I can do the things and say the things and give the hugs. But then when it's my turn to receive the love from other people, I'm like, whoa, this is not how it's supposed to be, right? I think I'm just supposed to give the love, not receive it. Anybody else really with that? But we're going to talk a little bit about that this morning too. But I wanted to start talking to you a little bit about my mom. And this is a very subjective thing I'm going to say, but my mom is the best mom in the whole world. I really think she is, you know. But everyone has the right to their own opinion. But she is 75 years old, and I called my mom last week, as I tend to do. We probably talk about once a week. I haven't lived with them for 20 plus years, but I love my mom, and we have a really good relationship. And she's 75 years old, and she has her ringtone is a duck quacking, right? So I know every time that I call, I can envision in my parents' house, there's this quack, 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 quack. And I kind of just like that anticipation. And then when someone finally answers, I know what's been happening on the other side. And so I was calling my mom, and she didn't answer. And so I called my dad and was like, Dad, I'm trying to call Mom. He's like, I know, I heard the duck. She's busy. She is down in the basement, because in Canada, we have basements. And she has pulled apart the washing machine. She's completely took it apart. She ordered a part on Amazon, and she's currently installing the part that she ordered on Amazon and putting it back together. 75 years old, my mother. And my mom has always been like this. She's always been that kind of a person who's just like, I don't know how to do that, but I'm pretty sure I can figure it out. And this was before YouTube. This was before, you just watch a tutorial. She just figured things out, and she has her own set of tools. My dad has his garage where he kind of looks at more like the car stuff. But when it comes to things that are broken inside the house, my mom is on the spot. She does all of the repairs. And there have been a couple times in my life when I remember that this has been really handy. And one of the first times I was thinking about this past weekend, because it was my first date. I was 17 years old, and I went on my first date. And I was really excited because I was going to go and drive and pick up this girl. We were going to go out to eat, and that was about it. But I think it was in February. I don't think it was for Valentine's Day necessarily. This was a while ago, too, so I don't have it crystal clear. But I was going to go on a date, my first one. And so when you're 17, you're kind of figuring out who you are, You're kind of figuring out, okay, what do I dress like? What do I look like? What do I like? What I don't like? And I remember in that attempt to kind of find out who I was, I bought a ring. Anybody dabbled in kind of jewelry and accessories when you're just trying to figure out who you are? Okay, so lots of kids get their ears pierced. I was not allowed to get my ear pierced, so I was like, I will buy a ring. And so I bought a ring, and it was a spinner ring, which I don't even know if they make those anymore, but it was basically a little band that goes on the outside of the band, and it spins, which looking back, for a kid with an ADHD, it's a good thing that you have your little fidget right in your ring. Anyways, so I had this ring, and I thought it was pretty cool, but it only fit on this finger, my ring finger, right, which makes sense. It did not fit on the other fingers, as those fingers are fatter. It did not fit. But it is February in the north, in Canada, and it is cold outside. I just looked, and it was minus 20 degrees Fahrenheit. That's about how cold it gets. And so on the night of my first date, I go outside, and I get into the car, and it takes a little while for the car to warm up. And what happens to your body when it's cold? Does anybody know? It gets a little smaller. Everything just kind of shrinks. And so I in that moment when everything was just kind of smaller, I took off my ring and I was able to put it on my middle finger. And I was like, this is great. I can put it on a new finger, right? And the car started to warm up, and I was on my way to pick up this girl, and I finally pick up the girl, and I realized, oh, I cannot get this ring off. Like, this is not coming off. And so I was playing with it, but also the more you play with it, then my finger started to swell. And by the time I looked at it, it looked like a balloon on the end of my finger because it had gotten so swollen because I could not get this ring off. And it finally got to the point, and I remember going to the restroom when we were at dinner. I went to the restroom with soap and was like trying to get off this ring. It would not come off. My finger was so swollen that I was like, I'm stuck. Like, this is never coming off. And so I finally said to the girl, look, I'm really sorry. This is a little embarrassing, but I need to do something about this. And she was like, what happened to your, because it looked like a giant hot dog instead of a finger, because my ring was completely stuck around my finger. And she said, okay, well, let's go to the emergency room. And I said, the emergency room? No. I'm going with my mom. Like, if there's someone that can fix this, it's my mom. So I drive back home with the girl. We're sitting in my kitchen, and my mom looks at me, and she's a very kind of just serious person, was like, oh yeah, I got something for that. And she goes back into who knows where, brings out her toolbox, of course, like all moms do, and brings out what's called a Dremel, which is a tool that spins. It's like a saw, basically. You can put different attachments on it, but it's a saw. And so she said, I can cut this off, no problem. And so I sat there with my giant finger, the girl that I was on a date with, sitting there in my kitchen with my mom on a Saturday night, and my mom begins to cut the ring off. She's cutting metal with her handheld saw. And so she's cutting it. But as you're cutting it, the ring is heating up and it starts to burn me. So she had to stop and take a pause. And then we'd put ice on it to cool it down. And then she would keep cutting and finally broke off the exterior band that spun and then finally got the ring off. But I was thinking about this moment because I'm so grateful that my mom is who she is, that she's not like other moms. And she's my mom. And I love my mom. But also I was thinking about the way that this applies, that I could have gone on this date with this girl and sat across from her, and I'm pretty good. I can like put together a conversation and like try to impress and and tell a good story. But there was something about that moment of that girl being in my kitchen and that moment of vulnerability that I am sure she got to know me better in that mini crisis, than 20 dates that we could have had where I put on a good face and I tell her kind stories and good jokes. Because we get to know people in moments of crisis. We get to know people when they are pressed and when we see what truly comes out of who they are. Those are the moments when we truly get to know what the person is like and who they really are. And what I want to talk about this morning is from a biblical perspective, that in order to truly love someone, you have to know them. And the way to know someone often comes through those difficult moments. And what is our natural reaction in difficult moments? If you guys are anything like me, when I'm going through something difficult in my life, just like Adam and Eve did something when they were in their hardest moment, they hid. There's a shame that we feel. And shame, when it does, it tells us in our heads, stay away. Don't get too close. Protect yourself. Intimacy is a threat to us right now, so stay away. And I want to talk to you guys, if you have your Bibles, in 1 Corinthians 8:3. Paul here is talking to the Corinthian church, and he's been talking about singleness and marriage and all the things that go along with that. There's a lot that he's teaching about, and then he transitions into talking about food that is sacrificed to idols. But he leaves this little pearl right in the middle in verse 3, which says, but whoever loves God is known by God. And they're talking about the situation that the Corinthian church had, where they had knowledge, and as Paul describes it, knowledge that puffs them up, as opposed to knowing God, which humbles them and brings them down. And there's this contrast between having a lot of information and truly knowing someone. I was reading something not too long ago about dating apps, and that the dating apps really hit this huge spike, And then it's kind of going back down. There's just a lot of disillusionment. People aren't really loving the dating apps anymore, which I think is a godsend because I don't think it was ever the best alternative. But if you met on a dating app, that's totally fine. I have people in my life that met on a dating app, and there's nothing wrong with that. But it's kind of going out of style. People are not looking to dating apps as much because there's a biblical principle at play that we have to understand. When the Bible talks about knowledge, knowing someone, known by God, they're not talking about head knowledge. They're not talking about reading a profile and knowing how tall and what your favorite things to do and your favorite restaurants. There's a knowledge of a person that goes far beyond what you could know about them, and it comes to knowing a person. The Bible uses this word yada in Hebrew or in Greek that talks about knowing a person on a deep level, to such a point that in the Old Testament, when they would say, and they, like Adam knew Eve, it was talking about intimacy. It was talking about sexual intimacy. That they knew each other in this most intimate way. And that's really the concept that we're talking about of knowing someone. This is an intimate knowing, not just about them, but knowing who they really are. That's what a dating app doesn't necessarily provide you at the onset. You can know about someone, but you still have to go through that whole process of knowing them. But the Bible talks here about those who love God are known by God. And just as I said a little while ago, that for some of us it's easier to love than to receive love. It's easier for us to give than to receive. For a lot of us too, it's easy for us to listen. It's easier for us to know somebody and get to know somebody and be that shoulder that people cry on and try to understand where people are coming from. But lots of us have a harder time letting our own selves be known. We have a hard time opening the door to our hearts and letting others see what's truly on the inside. Because if you're anything like me, you've become pretty good at putting up a facade of how you things should look from the outside. We're pretty good at appearances, and we come to a place like this, and we can say, yeah, everything's great. Oh, God is good. And then we go into the secret place, and all we have is tears because we can't take it anymore. And so there's something about the biblical knowledge of understanding what knowing a person is, that is deeply wrapped up in loving a person and knowing a person. You cannot love someone without knowing who they are. And you cannot know someone from a distance. And this gives so much light to the gospel in itself, that God did not love us from a distance, but decided to know us intimately, and so came Jesus. To not just die on the cross, but to truly understand our situation and love us up close, to know us. And so the challenge for us is that we live in this world where we are supposed to love each other. And I think every person here would want to grow in their relationships. They want to have healthier relationships. They want to have feel a deeper sense of love to the people around them, whether that be your spouse or your girlfriend, boyfriend, your kids, whatever, your parents, your neighbor, your friends, your aunt and uncle, whomever it may be, and even God. We want to love better and deeper. And the path to loving better and deeper is to know, but also to let ourselves be known. And so I want to talk about 3 obstacles that we see a lot when we're talking about love, and what really comes up and doesn't allow us to walk through the doors we need to go to experience that deeper sense of love. And so the 3 obstacles, number 1 is our fears. And our fears, sometimes we think of our fears, and people say, I don't really have any fears in love. Like, I'm pretty good. I'm pretty sure of who I am. But again, when they're in a situation of pressure, or when they are triggered and someone presses that button that they know how to press in your life and something comes up, it gives us an opportunity to see that what the fears are that are lying below the surface. Because every one of us have fears. We all fear something. And if you don't know what it is, I'm going to take a few guesses and you'll see if this is right. All of us were created to belong. All of us were created to feel like we have some place to call home. All of us were created to feel safe. And so when we have not had that in our stories, lots of times we take vows. Lots of times when we have hurts in our past where we have been rejected, when we have not felt safe, when someone has abused us or treated us poorly, when someone has betrayed our trust, we are hurt in that moment and we take a vow saying, this is never going to happen to me again. And from these vows come these defense mechanisms that try to keep the danger at bay. But lots of times these things happen when we're kids. Lots of times the adults in our lives are the ones that betray our trust or that don't give us what we need. They're the ones that instead of loving us unconditionally are the ones that are giving us unrealistic expectations that we have to meet. And so we grow up not understanding what the true essence of love is because we were betrayed when we were most vulnerable as kids. And we'd made vows with the best knowledge that we could do, the best that we knew how in that moment. We said, I'm never going to let someone hurt me this way again. And so I'm going to be like this. I'm going to do that in relationships. I'm going to say these things. I'm never going to let someone do this. And we create this wall of protection around us. And all of it is based on fear. Because we fear what it feels like to be rejected, to be betrayed, to be hurt, to feel like our lives are in danger and no one cares. Those are the deep lurkings of our heart, the things that are deep inside of our heart, in the caves of our heart, that we don't like to talk about, that we don't like to expose, because if people knew the things I was truly afraid of, they could exploit that. They would think I'm childish. They would think less of me. And so we enter into this dynamic, and the first obstacle we have, what does not allow us to be known by others and to truly know others, are the fears that are lurking in our hearts. Are you aware of the fears you have? Because if your reaction this morning or this afternoon is, I don't think I have any fears when it comes to love, like I'm good, I would suggest that you have some work to do. And I want to talk a little about how to do that work and what it looks like. But if we automatically assume that we're good, I think we have just gotten so good at this pretending game that we've even fooled ourselves. But really, the price that we're paying is that we don't have the deep relationships that God wants us to have with others and with Him. There's this verse that brings a lot of comfort to me personally. It says in 1 John 4:18, there's no fear in love, but perfect love drives out fear. Because fear involves punishment, and the one who fears is not perfected in love. And the amazing thing about this is that when we recognize our fears, that is not enough to get rid of them. When I understand that I fear deep in my heart that I don't measure up, which is something I personally have struggled with. And I noticed different moments in my life where I felt so triggered by something that I shut off. I don't know if anyone else can relate to this, but like there's something that's just like someone just like your switch, right? Like the toys in Toy Story, like when they're like they're done, right? They're off. And I feel like that sometimes with my wife when she's like, David, we need to talk about our relationship, and I'm like, right? I just completely shut off. Like someone just shut off the switch on my back. And I started becoming curious about this. David, what happens that you have this physiological reaction when my wife talks about certain things that have to do with me? The shame is so deep that my body wants to turn itself off. Like, red flag, something is going on here. And what do? That's just how I am. That's usually our response. Well, that's just kind of how I am. I don't know why. But God offers us this space where we can become curious about the things that we think are normal, but we know aren't. Because there are reactions that you have in relationships that, yes, you are accustomed to, but there's some part deep inside that you know that that's not how it should be. You know that there is a deeper way to relate to somebody. There's a deeper level of freedom that God wants you to have in your own relationships, of being known, of knowing, and being loved. And so for me, that was my journey. God, I'm going to start with what I have, and I have this behavior that I do not understand. I shut off when my wife talks about our relationship. And I'll give you kind of the time lapse of what happened. I realized that when my wife talks about how our relationship is not good enough, I heard, David, you are not good enough, and you do not measure up as a person. And with that wave of shame over my heart, reminding me of a lifelong battle of not feeling good enough, my body was like, I can't do this anymore. Let's just like shut down, and then maybe we can re-engage later. And I realized this, it was all based on fear. It was based on a fear that I was not measuring up. Because there was a part of my heart that was still looking to measure up, to be enough, to have worth. My interaction with my wife revealed my deepest fear. But we need God to do this work. We don't have the skills. We don't have the attention span. We don't have the insight that's required. We need the Holy Spirit of God to look into the deeper parts of our heart, in the doors that we've tried to keep shut. Enter with curiosity and ask Him to go into those spaces and see what's really there. And this is really an act of bravery. It is not an easy thing to go into the deepest parts of your heart. And if we didn't have the light of God, I would never want to go there. It's too painful. It's too bad. It's so shameful. But the peace that God gives us allows us and empowers us to do this work of to be still in His presence and open up those deep parts of us that we would rather keep closed and have Him direct our steps in that path of freedom. And so the first obstacle we have are the fears, and only you can do this work. One quick thing that I've seen talking to a lot of people, and I've seen in my own life, especially if there are any teenagers, or if you're a parent of teenagers, this is something that happens a lot, that we see that happens, and it's based on fear. But basically what happens is in a relationship, so if you can imagine, I don't know, a 16-year-old boy, and I relate to this 16-year-old boy, and even now as an adult, but it's basically, have you guys ever seen a sniper? Like, you know, those really big, long guns and a sniper? And then sometimes when they can hide themselves basically in a big shell, and there's just a little window where they take out the head of their rifle. And that's the only thing you can see. You can kind of see their eyes, but basically you have the head of the rifle sticking out of this little hole, and the rest is completely covered up. It's like a shell protecting them on all sides. And the only thing they have is to look out and fire. And so anyone that comes close, Mom is coming to ask me about my day, boom, we shoot, right? Dad's coming to ask about how my, boom. And that's all we do. That's the way we defend ourselves. We have this shell constructed around us that is keeping us safe. And anyone that gets too close, we've got eyes on them. But you know the way is that we melt this shell? You know the way is that we can melt through the fear that constructs these defense mechanisms that we've built? It's by someone coming and just staying. Maybe they're not asking pointed questions. Maybe they're not trying to get all the answers or trying to get you to talk, but they just stay there. And slowly, with the power of their presence, the shell that has protected them begins to melt. And the person is left. And the person can decide, do I really need this gun to keep me safe? Or can I trust in the power of the presence of the person beside me who has decided to remain, who's decided to be with me even when I wanted to keep them away? That's the power that God offers us, because so many of us are operating like that sniper in our shells, keeping ourselves safe because everyone else is a threat. And anyone else that gets too close, we can have a good conversation and we can look like everything's fine. But someone asks us how we're really doing, and we're ready to shoot. We're ready to just take them out. We're not letting anyone else get close. But God is that gentle Father that comes and just sits. There's so many times that I've said, God, why won't you just speak to me? Why won't you just say something? I really want to understand. And I think sometimes God says, I will. But first we gotta just sit. We gotta melt your shell first. You need to trust me. You need to trust me that I'm staying. I'm just going to be here. And that's enough. Maybe some of us have come this morning and we haven't realized how much we've tried to protect ourselves over the years. And God comes with this gentle message. He says, I won't hurt you. I can't betray you. I will never forsake you, and I will be here always. And that truth just melts what we've tried so hard to build to keep us safe. But what you are trying to do by keeping yourself safe is actually serving to keep you alone and completely isolated. The armor that we put on to keep us safe eventually keeps us from having true love. Because to be loved is to be known. And we have to let ourselves be known. The second thing that I think about that is so common in our lives when we talk about things that are obstacles for having us love deeply. And the second one, not that the first one was super easy to talk about, this one is even harder for me. It's pride. It's pride. And what is pride? Pride comes from that voice in your head that says to you, you need to be better than him, or you need to be better than her. You need to know more than her, or you need to do this better than them. It's always a comparison with another person where we find value for ourselves by comparing down to someone else. And so it's never going to be enough. And my goal with pride, the pride inside my heart isn't thinking that we need to be the best in the whole world. No. I don't need to be the best in the whole world. I just need to be a little bit better than him. I just need to be a little bit better than her. And that makes me feel okay right now. And the Bible talks about this in this language of pride puffing us up, like puffs of air going up. And it feels good in the moment when we think, oh, I am a little bit better than that person. Whew. But what puffs up does not really fill us up. Because the only thing that can truly fill us up is the true love of God that comes from a path of humility, not a path of pride. And I said this is hard for me because I struggle with it so much in my own marriage that I see my wife sometimes, and shocking, she's a little bit more emotional than me, or she expresses her emotions a little bit more regularly than I do. She's a little bit better at expressing her emotions than I am. And oftentimes she'll cry, and she'll just sit there and she's crying. And there is this war going on the inside of my heart. And on one side, you have the truth that is like, David, you're her husband. Go and give her a hug. It doesn't matter what's happening. Just be there. Go melt her shell. Just be there. And then there's the pride. And the pride's like, no. Do you think she was there for you all the times that you felt alone? Do you think you would struggle like she struggled? You don't struggle like that. You're a little bit better than her. So just keep yourself away. And that's how pride becomes this voice that keeps us from truly knowing someone and truly being known, because the path towards knowing someone requires vulnerability. It requires us taking steps, uncomfortable steps, that move beyond the things that we would want to do because we're responding not to our own needs, but to the needs of others. And there have been times where I listen to the voice of truth and I say, okay, David, swallow your pride and go and sit and be present. And I do it. And it's uncomfortable. And there's a part of me that doesn't like it. And then I walk in freedom. And then I feel true love. Because it's uncomfortable. I don't like it when I have to do it. But then I do it, and I feel this is the path towards true love. When I get over myself, and I get over this false dilemma of I have to be better than someone to be anything at all. And not get my identity from trying to be better than my own wife. I'm just showing up for her in the middle of what she needs right now. And that's enough. And I don't have to have a whole speech ready, or I don't have to have 6 verses that she can refer to. I just have to be there. But my pride says, no. You don't struggle like that. No. And so pride becomes one of the biggest obstacles we have to loving well, because it does not let us get close to another. Because when we compare ourselves to others, we are always maintaining a distance. And God calls us to come close to know in order to love. Look at this quote by C.S. Lewis. I like it. It says, pride is spiritual cancer. It eats up the very possibility of love or contentment or even common sense. And just as a cancer, if left unattended, it metastasizes. It gets bigger. It grows in our bodies It doesn't just stay the same. If pride left unchecked will inevitably grow and take on more parts of our heart. And pride is that voice in your head that says, don't do that. That's embarrassing. Don't tell him don't tell your mom that you love her, because sometimes you don't feel that. Don't be fake. And this voice of pride, so often we listen to it, and we give them a little throne in the corner of our heart. And from there, they dictate the way that we should live. But as long as we are giving a little throne to pride in our heart and allowing pride to dictate the way we interact with others, we will never truly experience the love of God. Because God's love is not about comparing. God's love for us never says, you are loved and more loved than him. You are my beloved and just a little bit better than that one. God's love does not compare. That is a pattern of thinking that is of this world, that to be someone you have to be better than someone else. And to have value, then you have to have a little bit more value than someone else. That's the only path. And it's a lie. And our hearts so quickly believe it. The third thing that we struggle with, thinking about things that are obstacles for us to truly love well, and this is the final thing, is our lack of identity. And I don't know about you, but there have been many times where I am not able to love well, and I am not able to let others know who I really am because I'm still trying to figure out who I am. And many times, I am looking for that answer in all the wrong places. It's like, I always think of it that we are born with this socket in ourselves, and we're trying to look to connect with others. And it fits perfectly, someone just to connect with. And we think, and we run around with these cords looking where we can connect to get our sense of purpose, our sense of worth. And so we're looking to connect to others when really this was made for connecting to God first. Because he is the only one who can really tell us who we really are. He's really the only one that can give us the identity that we so crave. Would any of you feel like, I know exactly who I am and I love it? I just feel so much peace with him. There is nothing I would change. I don't think any of us have gone to that point. Because we still doubt what God has really done. We still doubt what God really says of us. And we are still believing the voice that tells us that we are this, that we are that, instead of listening to the voice of God that tells us who we really are. And so I know that there are people here that have done things that they're ashamed of, or have had things happen to them that they would never want to talk about with anyone. That there are parts of you that you would rather hide. That there are parts of you that you wish that no one would ever know, and maybe no one does. But God longs for you to feel his love. And the path to feeling that love and to receiving that love from God is letting yourself be known. And the road isn't to do, or the way to do this is not on social media and put like, okay, everybody, I'm willing to tell everybody who I really am, and here, I hope it goes well. No, if we look at the life of Jesus, it was a similar predicament. Jesus walked in crowds. He had a lot of influence. He had a lot of followers. He could have given a different kind of message, and we would have those written down in the Bible, because what he taught in the crowds is now written in our Bibles. But he was very specific in who he chose to be in his inner circle. He did not tell his most intimate things to the crowds. He had a group of 3 guys in whom he confided. I'm sure he had his mom and Mary, that the Bible teaches that they had this close relationship. And the other Mary and Martha, and he had other individuals that were selected in his life that formed his inner circle. He wasn't sharing his most intimate things with everybody. He was maintaining those sacred spaces for his intimate circle. And so the goal for all of us is not to become this open book for everyone, that everyone knows everything about us. No. Because if we follow Jesus, then we also have to live like he lived and act like he acted, and he did not do that. He had a select group of individuals with whom he would spend special moments in his most intimate and most vulnerable moments. That was his way. That's the model. That's who we are after. That's what we're supposed to follow. But you have to have somebody. Because if you think that you can get through this by yourself, you do not understand the dynamic of love. You do not understand how this works. Because the goal is love. Is there anything else you crave more in this life than to be fully known just as you are and fully accepted? Is there anything that you would want more in this life than to feel in the deepest part of who you are that you have somebody that knows everything about you and treasures you and loves you and accepts you more than anything else? That is the deepest part of who we are. That is the God-sized hole in our souls that only He can fill. So if you are doubting this morning or this afternoon with the things that you've done, the things that have been done to you, the struggles that you've had, it is a good moment to remember that when God talks about the things of our past, whatever they may be, Jesus stands in the middle. Jesus absorbs the wrath that is due. The guilt that we feel is no longer ours to bear because we are now found in Jesus. And anything that comes from what we've done in the past or what has been done to us is absorbed by Jesus. And it doesn't have to be absorbed by us. So we can open those locked doors of the caves of our hearts. Not to everyone, but at least to somebody. Because that is the path towards feeling and knowing that we are truly loved. We have to let ourselves be truly known. One of my favorite parts of the Bible to talk about this is Psalm 139. I'm sure you guys are familiar with it. But I would encourage you during this week just to read through this psalm. It's not too long. And it talks about God knowing us. And we can understand from Scripture that we can take this as our own. This prayer that was written down thousands of years ago still applies to those of us who believe in Jesus today. And it says, "You searched me, Lord, and you knew me." And certainly He has seen every crevice of your soul and knows every secret of your heart, every thought in your mind, every feeling that you've tried to hide, every inner battle that you've ever fought and lost or won. He is aware of it all. And His conclusion is, I know you. I know you. All of it. And if God says He's willing and able to know you, it also means He loves you. Just as you are, with everything you've lived through, with everything you've done, with everything you're struggling with, He sees. He understands. He forgives. And He really, really loves you. And now there's nothing that you could ever do to change His mind about that. There's nothing you could ever walk through, no struggle that you could face that would change His mind about the way He feels about you. That is not yours to decide. You can't decide that. He's made it very clear in His Word, and what we know about His Word is that it never changes, and He doesn't change. So God's invitation for us is to go into the difficult places, but not alone. God's invitation for us is to go into those dark places that we would rather hide and pretend that don't exist, but not by ourselves. God's invitation is that we would experience this deep and rich and nourishing love. And to walk in that love, we have to let ourselves be known. Are you willing to take that step? Are you willing to do one thing this week to let yourself be known? And maybe your next step is just to start with God, which is the best place to start. Where every morning, instead of looking at your phone when you wake up, you say, I'm going to read Psalm 139 and I'm going to try and believe. And this feels fake. but I believe in God more than my feelings. I believe God's word is more true than this voice in my head. And so I'm going to believe God. And I'm going to read this. I'm going to do my best. God, search me and know my heart and know my thoughts. And lead me in your path that is everlasting. And you know what the Bible defines as that everlasting path? Jesus says, eternal life is this, to know God and to know Jesus, the one who he sent. Because it all comes back to knowing, and it all comes back to loving. You can take one step this week to grow in that knowledge. There's not just head knowledge, and grow in that love. So I'm just going to ask you to stand in this moment. And if you feel like you want to grow in that, I'm just going to ask you to open up your hands. And as we open up our hands together, we're just saying, God, I open up the doors. I'm going to put my sniper rifle down for a minute, and I'm going to let you get close. I'm going to put aside the arguments that I so often use to keep you at bay. I'm going to understand the fear that is lurking in my heart. I'm going to choose not to listen to the pride that puffs me up but leaves me dry and empty. I'm going to lean into the fact that I am your child and there's nothing I could do to ever have that taken away from me. And I just ask that you would examine our hearts, God. God, would you open up the deep parts of our heart and let us be known by you? You, the author, the one who created and wrote the story from beginning to end, invite you just to know us with that deep knowledge. Know us in this moment, God. Our story is plain before you. It's right before you. There's nothing hidden. God, we open the door to those shameful parts of our past, the things that we prefer not to talk about and we never want to have to face again. God, we open the door, and not that you would condemn us, but that you would free us, God. Because we want to love you and we want to know you. We want to be known by you and we want to feel loved by you, God. Because it's the deepest need we have. But help us, God. Help us to open our hearts to continually come before you and ask that your word would shine its light on the deep and dark parts of our hearts. And you would lead us in paths of freedom.